Today, it's my absolute honor and privilege to introduce our guest, David Crisafulli, the leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Em, and it's not just you who's excited. I'm excited too, so thank you very, very much for having me. My dad desperately hopes that one day I'll stop this crazy nonsense, this politics.
Well, it's important work you're doing. You're currently the leader of the opposition in Queensland, and that's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, people need to trust the government.
There are many stories out there of strength, resilience, and courage, and we're on a mission to bring them all to you. Welcome to Empowered Voices Amplified, a podcast brought to you by Skilled Migrant Professionals magazine. Today, it's my absolute honor and privilege to introduce our guest, David Crisafulli, the leader of the opposition and Shadow Minister of Tourism. Not sure if you can pick it up in my voice, but I'm really excited and keen for this interview. David has proudly represented the people of Broadwater in the Queensland Parliament since 2017. He was born and bred in Ingham in North Queensland, the son of sugarcane farmers and small business owners. I definitely want to know more about this. First elected to state parliament in 2012, David was one of just 3 members of parliament who were appointed to cabinet at the start of their first term. David served as Queensland Minister for Local Government, Community Recovery and Resilience until 2015. As a minister in the then LNP government, David undertook the biggest reform to local government in a generation by empowering local leaders, as well as overhauling the way Queenslanders rebuild communities after natural disasters. Following the 2015 state election, David established a small business offering, planning and government strategy advice, and relocated his family to Northern Gold Coast. Re-elected to state parliament in 2017, David was appointed Shadow Minister for Environment, Science, and the Great Barrier Reef, and Shadow Minister for Tourism. Following the 2020 state election, David was elected leader of the opposition and continues to serve as Shadow Minister of Tourism. David is a proud member of the LNP and is an effective critic of the state Labour government. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Em, and it's not just you who's excited. I'm excited too, so thank you very, very much for having me.
Glad to hear that. I do want to talk a bit about your parents were sugarcane farmers. So did you grow up on a farm? How was that like?
Amazing. And why I'm so excited to do this interview is it gives me a chance to explain my family story, which I'm really proud of. And most days I have to talk about politics and policy, and that's great. That's part of my job. But I'm very, very proud of multiculturalism in this state. I really am. And family story is so similar to many of your listeners about people who decide to come to a new country and start again and give their kids an opportunity. That's my family story. And yep, you're right. I did grow up on a sugarcane farm. Mum and dad are still on that farm now. And my dad desperately hopes that one day I'll stop this crazy nonsense, this politics, and come home to the family farm. Who knows?
Well, it's important work you're doing. You're currently the leader of the opposition in Queensland, and that's a huge responsibility. What key contributors do you think have led you to where you are today?
Honesty and the desire to make sure that things are better for Queenslanders. And I often talk about the challenges facing Queensland, but we don't just do that. We also talk about our solutions to the problem. So right now in Queensland, we've got a health crisis, a youth crime crisis, a housing crisis, and the cost of living pressures on people are as bad as I've ever seen them. So for every one of those, we've spoken about our solutions. And I've also given targets of what I want to achieve within the first 100 days of government if we're given the privilege of governing. I want Queenslanders to know we're serious about not just pointing out the problems, but doing something about it. They're the battle lines for the next election, those challenges: youth crime, health, housing, cost of living. That is our focus. They are the priorities for this state's future.
Well, David, we do have a lot of listeners that tune into our podcast. If you can share maybe 1 or 2 things that you're thinking as solutions, which people can get excited about and get to know where your heart is.
Thanks, Em. With health, within 100 days, Queenslanders will see in real time what's happening in their hospital. I'm serious about open data. We're going to return maternity services to regional areas, and we're going to drive down ambulance ramping through things like triaging and putting doctors and nurses back in charge. So that's important to us. When it comes to youth crime, we want to get serious about early intervention. I want gold standard early intervention to turn young people around before a lifetime of crime. We also want to rewrite the Youth Justice Act, and we're going to do that straight away. And I want to embed consequences for actions to make sure that the rights of the victim come before the rights of the offender. Housing is the other challenge. We've seen a decline of lots year on year, and that's created a real feeding frenzy at the bottom of the market, and people can't afford to pay their rent. They can't afford to get into the market. We are going to work with councils to deliver infrastructure to open up more lots. We're going to bring the community housing sector back to Queensland. We're the only state that's gone backwards. We're going to roll out the red carpet for them and deliver social housing on time and on budget. If we do that, we can make sure that people can again dream of owning a home, and those who are renting can afford to keep a roof over their head. So they're just some of the solutions we've put forward already.
That's excellent. Those are the things that we know a lot of people are currently talking about. So thank you for sharing that with us. David, you hold a Bachelor of Journalism degree from James Cook University. You've worked in media and have transitioned into politics. And since then, you've made an incredible mark. I've read a lot about the work you've been doing. It's really impressive. Can you walk us through this journey of, just studying and getting into politics, leaving media? How has that been like for you?
I started work in my little hometown, a little sugar town called Ingham in North Queensland, and I worked at my little local paper there. I studied full-time as well as worked full-time at the back end of my degree, and that was a really great experience to be not just learning but putting it into practice. I then got into television and moved to Townsville, which is a city to the south, about an hour south of my little sugar town, and I started working television there. I ended up running for a seat on the local council, and that was where my interest in politics first started, on that local council. And it's a great level of government to really deal with people's issues and to be able to learn how to listen and care about people. And I did 2 terms on my local council. And in 2012, that's when I went into state parliament, which is what you've touched on just now.
So you describe yourself as a centrist and centralist. These are interesting terms. What does this mean for you, and how does this influence your leadership style and the policies you support?
It's a good question. It means that the reason why I'm in politics is for people, and I'm not someone who gets carried away with the big philosophical debates, and they're important. I get that, and people like to have their debates. Some people see things from the right, some people see things from the left, and that helps our political system to have those tests. For me, it's about people, and the issues I talk about aren't about philosophical views. It's about how can I make sure when somebody picks up a phone that an AMBO will be able to turn up there and give that person the help. Because at the moment in Queensland, our ambulance ramping is the worst in the country. How is it when somebody is under siege in their home and they need a police officer? How can we deliver services to make sure that a police officer turns up? Because at the moment, there are 322 less police in Queensland than 18 months ago. How is it that we can go from the lowest home ownership rate in the state, in the country, to the highest? What are the tools we can do for that? That's what drives me in politics. It's always been about people for me, and you're right. That's how I see the world, through that prism.
This is quite impressive. You've got such a good pulse on what's happening in the community. And we talk, like in our program, we talk a lot to people in the community, and we do visit a lot of community places. And what you're talking about is exactly what the sentiment is on the ground. So it's quite impressive that you've got a pulse on that. And speaking of you having a pulse on the community, can you talk us through, because I'm sure most of our listeners would love to know a bit about your journey. So before politics, before university, what was it like growing up in your community? And what do you think gave you a heart for this, for just caring about people and the communities that you're leading?
It was about people. It was about the community, and I had a really blessed childhood. Mum and dad raised us and taught us the value of hard work, getting up early. I'm
Mm.
still an early riser. I get out of bed every day at 4 and try to do some little bit of exercise to start the day. They're the values that mum and dad instilled in my sister and I. I have one sister. She's 5 years older than me. She often rings me to tell me that people often say that she's my younger sister because she looks much better than me. That's what a career in politics will do. She loves that. She trades on that. She'll be watching this, I can guarantee you. She's been very successful in her own right. She owns a couple of little businesses in our hometown, a dress store and a kids store, and she works hard. And I love people in
Mm.
small and family business. So many multicultural people go into small and family business either to work
Mm.
for a small and family business or to own one. It just aligns with our values, and she does a
Mm.
great job. I'm really proud of her. But that was our background. Typical day for me growing up: get up, go to school, and within 1 second of getting home, throw your bag down, and we would grab a cricket bat in the summer and we'd grab a footy in the winter, and that was us. On weekends we'd go and work on the farm, and in between it, you'd ride motorbikes and you'd play sport. And I had a really lucky childhood, and I'm I love the ability to be able to tell that story because it was only possible because my late grandfather came to this country when he was about 40 years of age to start afresh,
Mm.
and he didn't know a
Wow.
single word of English. He didn't know anything about where he was heading to. He just knew that if he worked hard in a cane field with a cane knife, he'd be able to start afresh and be able to give an opportunity. And my dad left school at 13 to go onto that farm because they needed people to work on it. And as a result of that, I got the opportunity to go to university and be able to work in a different field. So I've been very, very fortunate.
Mm. And isn't that what's great about our country, particularly? I mean, I love Queensland. And I think what you've said is exactly one of the things that are great about our state, working hard. And everything that you've mentioned, obviously, I can see why you've got a pulse on the housing crisis, health system, everything, because you know how life can be for the ordinary Queenslander. That's very impressive. What were some of the key obstacles or setbacks that you've encountered, if any, growing up, and how did you overcome them?
Like anyone, I grew up in a regional area, so that means access to many of the services that people take in the city we didn't have. In many cases, people who grow up in regional areas, you don't have access to even things like maternity services in many places. So it's always a challenge. What it's done is made me realise the importance of, wherever possible, giving people the option to world-class services, and that's what we should be about. No matter where you live, you should have access to world-class health services. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the smaller communities won't have access to some of the specialties that you see in the city, of course, but we should
Mm.
be looking to reinvest in country areas. And that was growing up, I saw that. I saw friends and family having to get treatment and go to Brisbane, and I saw the challenges that come with people having to save up money to send their kids to sporting carnivals in the south. There were sacrifices that had to be made, and I'm very grateful for people in regional areas who do that. Uh, that said, people in the city areas have got huge cost pressures as well. The amount they're paying for rent and mortgages, and the challenges of keeping food on the table and educating kids. It's pretty tough at the moment, and cost of living is one of my really, really big focuses. And I want to make sure that people can pay their power bills, and that we can find a way to deal with youth crime, so we drive down those insurance premiums. I'm determined to give people a maintenance guarantee to keep power plants opening. We've got to do all we can to make things
Mm.
affordable for people.
That's really good. What actionable advice or tips would you have for people, particularly migrants, who want to be in politics or leadership positions in corporate Australia?
Please get involved. We are
Mm.
better for having people of different backgrounds involved in the political process. And I mean that. I've gone out of my way to make sure that multicultural communities know that they matter to us. There's a senator in Queensland by the name of Paul Scar, who's a Liberal senator, and he's done a bucket load of work with the multicultural communities because he's passionate about it. And I pride myself on being equally passionate. I love what multiculturalism brings to the state. And I'm going to keep doing all I can to show people from multicultural backgrounds that they should get involved in politics. That might be as an elected official, it might be as a member of parliament, it might be working in corporate Australia, as you said. Either way, we are better if we have a different sort of views, of backgrounds, of beliefs, genders, ages. That makes for better decision making. So I really, really would encourage uh, people who are watching your podcast today, please get involved, please.
That's a good one. Please get involved. David, do you think there's still work to be done to make Australia, and we'll focus on Queensland, obviously, to make it more inclusive in terms of gender, race, age? You touched a little bit on that in the boardroom, in senior leadership, and in politics. And if there is, what role do you see yourself playing?
There is, and there's a big role for me to play. I'm leader of a major political movement, so I have to play a big role. It's important to me. It's important to the LNP. It's important to Queensland. So I've gone out of my way to make sure that the candidates that we're putting forward for the October election, our candidates, I want them from a vast array of backgrounds. And when people look at that, they'll see that. They'll see that we've been very successful in the breadth of offering that's coming forward. We've got a lot more young people, a lot more women, a lot more people from small and family backgrounds. We've a lot more people from culturally diverse backgrounds. That's all of those are important to me, and I have a big role to play in making sure that we continue to do that, because we will be a better parliament and a better state if we do.
That's absolutely true. There's research and a lot of work that's been done to prove that's true when you've got diversity around the board. And I like the areas that you touched on, which is age, race, gender, because it's just not one thing. It's a lot of things coming together. So, David, outside of politics, and I know politics takes up a huge chunk of your time, which we're grateful for, but outside of that, what else do you do? How
I love
else do you
sport.
pass the time?
I love sport, Em. I don't have a lot of time to play anymore these days, but I love sport. I've got two daughters. They love sport as well. So if if I get a chance, nothing pleases me more than to sit down and watch a bit of cricket with them, for example. And I have to say, I'm a purist. I'm a cricket purist. So I love Test cricket, but T20 has introduced them to the sport, and I'm gradually pulling them across to watch Test cricket with Dad, which is a pretty good thing. So I love cooking. My wife and I really enjoy making Italian meals. I would say to people watching your podcast, I do from time to time on my social media platforms, including TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, I put some of my Italian family recipes. I'd
Ah,
encourage you to go and watch them, but don't tell my family that I'm doing it, because if they ever find out, there's big trouble. There's big trouble. But no, I love cooking. I'm not a great cook, but I've been the beneficiary of seeing some amazing cooks. My late grandmother, my nonna, was the best cook I've ever seen. She could turn
oh.
nothing into something very special. My mum's a great cook. My wife's a great cook, and I try very, very hard, and I love it.
It's really good. Before we end the show, definitely need to know where our listeners can find you, because the moment you mentioned recipes, I'm sure a few people's ears would really pick up, because that is something that a lot of people love doing. Cooking, that's a great way to build relationships as well. So if you've gone through a lot since you started, from university and throughout your political career, what motivates you to keep pushing forward?
The desire for a better Queensland. I love the
Mm.
place. I grew up in an era where this state was building things and it was coming of age, and I want Queenslanders to know that our best days do lie ahead of us. And the Queensland that I know and I love is one that's built on the back of new opportunities for tourism and agriculture and mining. But I also want people to know that there's new opportunities when it comes to things like education and medical research. We're the smartest people in their nation, and we should be driving that hard. There are huge opportunities there. In order to do that, people need to trust the government. They need to know that there's certainty when it comes to tax and regulation. There's certainty when it comes to delivery of services. And at the moment, that's not there. But I want to give people hope that there is a better way. And we're pushing for change in October this year, I can promise you.
So, what would you like to leave our audience with? Something empowering. What we do on our show is, it's about empowered voices amplified, and you're certainly an empowered individual. What is it that you can give people, something motivating that they can carry throughout, their week and the rest of the year?
I want them to believe in Queensland. And I know as the leader of the opposition, people expect me always to say what's wrong. I like to always point out where I would do things better. And I want people to know that they live in the best state. And bones of Queensland are so good. And you live in an amazing place. Look outside your window. Be grateful for food and family and fun and freedom. You've got it here. It's a great place. It really is. And I intend to spend the rest of my life in this state, and I know so many of your viewers will as well.
Well, it indeed is a great space to live in. And one of the things that I would love to know from you as well is, you're motivated by people and communities and everything. In terms of how you get inspired, what inspires you, who inspires you, and who do you look up to as a role model for the work that you're doing?
Queenslanders, they inspire me. And I know people are probably expecting me to say the name of a great politician or a great sportsman, but in all honesty, I get inspired by everyday people. On the weekend, I was at my local school and we were cleaning up after a big storm came through. I represent the Northern Gold Coast, and for those of your viewers in the southeast, you would have experienced on Christmas night that storm. Well, it ripped through the area that I represent really, really hard, and one of my little local schools copped a beating. And the school community just put a little thing on the school website. If people have got time, pop along. There were dozens of people there, just there lending a hand, picking up the debris so that the kids can go back to school. And that's what I love. That's what inspires me. I love the state. We've got great people. We've got an aspirational state. It's a place where people want more for their kids. And that's what I love about the migrant story, the multicultural story. So often I'll speak to somebody from a multicultural background, someone who's migrated here and in whatever format, and I'll ask them about themselves. And they'll talk about themselves for about 1 millisecond, and then they pivot and say, oh, but my daughter's studying medicine. My son's doing engineering. They're so proud of their kids. And in many cases, they come here so that their kids get the education that they weren't given the chance to. And that's my story, my family's story to a T.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And a lot of our listeners can definitely align with that. So I thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of Empowered Voices Amplified. Before we go though, David, where can people find you? Where can they read more about you and know more about the work you're doing?
Well, we're on all the social media channels. I've also got a website, which is DC, so for David Crisafulli, DCLNP. But I'd love people to jump on and follow us. And I can promise you, for those of you who are getting on TikTok, I don't sing, I don't dance. That's worth following. A politician that won't sing or dance. No, absolutely not. No chance.
Well, we might get a few requests coming in to see a few dance moves and a bit of singing. So watch this space. Some things can change. And this is TikTok we're talking about as well. So, David, thank you again for taking the time out of your really busy schedule to talk to us. Thank you for those notes of wisdom that you have imparted. And we really hope that wish you all the best in the journey. It's good for us as Queenslanders, and it will be good for our listeners. Thank you to our listeners as usual. If you have listened to this and you have any comments or questions that you have, please feel free to drop us a note. You know where to find us. Thank you once again, and stay empowered.